Hello Snugglebugs and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to actually be looking at the top 5 cards by class that will be leaving in the next expansion. Now I'm not necessarily saying that the most 5 powerful. I think they're the top 5 most impact cards. There's a lot to discuss, so I broke this up into 2 videos. In this video we're going to be going over the cards for the Demon Hunter class, the Druid class, the Hunter class, the Mage class, and actually the neutral cards. So without too much introduction, let's just get right into it. Top 5 Demon Hunter cards that I think some people will miss after the rotation. Crimson Sigil Runner. I believe that Crimson Sigil Runner is just it's a 1-mana 1/1, most of the time draw card, or usually that's when you play it. And for those reasons, maybe not as much recently in some of the Fellfire type of burn decks or whatever it may be, but has been in a lot of Demon Hunter decks over the last couple of years. This will be the first rotation for Demon Hunter, as they had come out 2 years ago from Ashes of Outland, unless this turns into a core card when the year switches over, which may have been a core card provided to people last year as well who weren't there, I guess, for Ashes of Outland. I think that this card will hinder possibly some early game in those Demon Hunter decks. If anything, just the fact that it's a more classic Demon Hunter card. I'd feel remiss if I didn't include the Fellfire Deadeye here. This card, along with the 7-mana card that summons the 7 1/1s with Rush, that also then summons 7 more 1/1s with Rush. Ever since the Demon Hunter Hero card has come into play, that allows you to refresh every time a minion attacks. Once they get out the Hero card, sort of put you on this, oh, I have to be careful not to have, say more than X amount of health on your board, or else they could end up hitting me for like 20 points of damage with their hero power next turn. Both the Fellfire Deadeye and the spell card are rotating out this expansion. That reason, that will hinder how we see Demon Hunters played today. Spectral Sight is similar to the Crimson Sigil Runner, where I believe it was technically core last year, but as far as its set goes, it was from Ashes of Outland, so unless they keep it in core during the rotation, it will be leaving our set rotation. Similar again to the Crimson Sigil Runner, I think this is just one of those cards that it was in the quest line Demon Hunter. It's been in other Demon Hunters just for the sake that either 2-mana draw 1 or 2-mana draw 2 is pretty decent for cycling through your deck. It's been played in a very high amount of Demon Hunter decks over the last 2 years, and it rotating out, it'll be tough, I think, to fill that slot in the deck. Immolation Aura is probably the best, or one of the best and most efficient board clears that Demon Hunters have had. It's kind of been popping up, like it hasn't been steady through the last few years, like maybe some other cards have been, but it's always made its presence known. It's a very potent card. Like, yes, 2 mana, say, deal 2 to all minions isn't fantastic by itself, but of course, Demon Hunter decks that play Immolation Aura also tend to play spell damage minions, and the fact it's a fell spell also means it gets repeated, say, off of Jace, and it's just a very potent spell to clear board. And a 2-mana spell that can really deal with, say, face hunters or a lot of aggro decks relatively efficiently is very powerful. And seeing that leave their kit could leave the Demon Hunter a bit more vulnerable. And probably to nobody's surprise, Skull of Gul'dan, I think, would be the biggest impact to the Demon Hunter that'll be rotating out. This card has been nerfed once, I believe, shortly after it had first come out. It was nerfed from 5 mana to 6 mana, I'm pretty sure. Honestly, 6 mana draw 3 cards isn't even too far off of Sprint from Rogue, which is 7 mana draw 4 cards. However, this has the Outcast, which of course isn't always super easy, but generally pretty easy in most Demon Hunter decks to use it as Outcast, reduces them by 3, so effectively it kind of gives for negative 3 mana. If you draw all things that cost 3 or more, you get to draw 3 cards, which of course is very powerful. Now, you do have to sacrifice tempo sometimes to play this. If you don't draw things you can immediately play this turn. It's still kind of 6 mana, don't do anything on the board, but then the tempo upside either the next turn or the turns later. I feel like this card in particular has been a staple in all Demon Hunter decks. It's irreplaceable, really, and it's very powerful, and it'll be interesting to see the Demon Hunter class without the Skull of Gul'dan. Druid's top 5 caveat, I'll call it groups of cards, just because, but cards that will be rotating out of standard as of our next expansion. So first, of course, we have to mention the ramp package. So this is why I did say it's not exactly 5 cards for Druid, partially because it was hard to nail down 5 cards that just 5 cards. So kind of included Lightning Bloom here, technically with the Druid and the Shaman, because it's just so powerful. So Lightning Bloom leaving rotation, I think, will help a lot the decks, as well as Overgrowth. So with Overgrowth and the Lightning Bloom ramp package both rotating out, I think will actually go a long way to making a lot more other cards with Druid, say, a bit more balanced. Mainly Guff. There's been a lot of discussions around how powerful Guff is as a card. I do think he's very powerful. He may need some form of change of just the mana crystals he gains, you maybe being empty. However, I do think the main reason he's such a powerful card is because you can either cheat him out and get him out on like turn 1 or 2, as well as the fact that with his ability to get to 20 mana, you can actually get to 20 mana before other people get to 10 with things like Overgrowth. So I think with those rotating out, it'll help balance the Guff and the Druid packages. Along with Resizing Pouch. Resizing Pouch is one of those cards that it's just a nice card where technically it's like a 1 mana. You use it when you kind of either looking for something specific or you're fishing for an answer or something like that, where you can sort of tutor out a certain cost, or just, you know, you got nothing to do, you top deck it, and it's almost a perfect answer in the sense of, you know, you have 10 mana, here's a 9-drop, 8 mana, 7-drop, etc. And it's just proven to be a very powerful card, especially on turn 1, to get you things like the Lightning Blooms, as we mentioned before, as well as, you know, you're over 10 mana with the Guff, and it gets you 10 mana cards, so you can play multiple Yashirajas, Yogg-Saron's, Raid Boss Onyxias, and things like that. So losing Resizing Pouch, I think, will remove some of the utility. Solar Eclipse. So we could have included the Lunar Solar Eclipse as a duo, but in all honesty, I think Lunar Eclipse is a good card, but not crazy strong, where I think Solar Eclipse has been played in almost every version of Druid, at least anything that plays spells. The ability to, say, cast 2 Cenarian Wards, so effectively a Solar Eclipse for 2 mana gives you an 8 mana card, so it's like a 6 mana discount in that specific instance. Seeing Solar Eclipse rotate out, I believe, will allow for control and ramp Druids to have a little bit less consistency with all that armor gain in standard format, or most of those real big ramp packages like Overgrowth. Getting to 10 mana, playing Solar Eclipse, Cenarian Ward, to sort of rebuild and defend after possibly taking some hits. In the early game is sort of their comeback mechanic, so they're not only losing the ramp along with the Solar Eclipse, they're also going to be losing the Cenarian Ward itself. So Cenarian Ward is also going to be rotating out, and I mean, it's mostly prominent when people use it with the Solar Eclipse to play it basically twice, but even just as an 8 mana random 8-cost minion, which not always is great, but is on average pretty good, and then also just gaining that 8 armor. Other than aggro Druid, I believe Cenarian Ward is played in like just about every version of Druid out there, so seeing this rotate out, again, I think is going to really impact the shell of a lot of Druid decks out there today. And last but not least, for the Druid, we're actually going to switch gears and talk about something a bit more on the aggro Druid side, more typically, but even sometimes in Spell Druid or mid-range Druid, Token Druid, basically anything that actually brings out a board of minions versus ramping up and bringing out 1 or 2 big threats at a time. It's definitely defining. Like when we look back at, say, the aggro Druid that I played a few days ago, we look at how, well, yeah, that deck's really good and it's really powerful. Arbor Up makes it so people have to clear your board. Like, it's not a matter of just like, oh, they're going to do 10 damage to me next turn. It turns into, oh, okay, they have the 5 minions that are going to do 10 damage to me, which means it's going to double due to Arbor Up. Not to mention it just buffs their health, not just for 1 turn, and it summons 2 other minions on board. So, but just the fact that it sort of gives any other bodies on board sort of that rush-ish potential with that stat boost just has made Arbor Up, rightfully so, a very powerful and sometimes deck-defining card. Top 5 cards for the Hunter class that will be rotating out during the next standard rotation. Ringling's Rifle. I don't have this card. I've talked about it in a couple of my videos. I do think it's very powerful. I think it's been in a lot of different Hunter decks for the sake that it's... I know it's a bit expensive in the sense of with the fact that it can discover you either to ice traps to help keep you alive, to explosive traps to do 4 more damage. So in effect, it becomes like an 8 damage, plus possibly dealing more damage to minions' weapon. Has just made it versatile. Play around with what your opponent's doing while smashing face in either face hunter or like tempo hunter decks or mid-range hunter decks. It's just really powerful. And for that reason, I don't think it's something that like you need a replacement for, in the sense of like some of the other cards I've mentioned for the other classes, where it's like, how are they going to replace this in the decks? But I do think it's just going to be missed. Adorable Infestation, dual card with the Druid, also probably being missed in the aggro Druid deck. Face Hunter just loves this card so much. You play your Magic Initiate, you put Adorable Infestation on it, all of a sudden you have a 4/3 and a 1/1 on turn 2. Seems really strong. Plus it gives you that extra 1/1 to your hand that when you have an extra mana during your other turns with your other cheap stuff, you can just throw it out there to give that to you. And for that reason, I just think this card is really powerful. The Demon Companion, on the same note as, honestly, a lot of the cards on this list for the Hunter deck. Face Hunter is always a thing. I'm sure there's going to be cards that kind of replace these to make them a thing. But I do feel the 1 mana get a random Demon Companion has been around for a while, and it just... The fact it's a spell as well, another 1 mana spell similar with the Magic Initiate, just allows you to possibly get that 4/3 out and then maybe a 2/1 with charge, right? You know, and or power it up with the thing that gives your minions 1 attack. I think the Demon Companion could be a difficult replacement in the Face Hunter style deck lists. Woolper Tinger. Now, he's obviously in Face Hunter decks, but he's also been played in like any form of beast deck. I forget exactly what it was, but it was a fun one at it for a while, where the idea was you kept putting copies of like Woolper Tinger back in your deck and you buff them in your deck and things like that. So you're constantly drawing and playing like 2 5/5s for like 1 mana, or even 2 3/3s for 1 mana and that kind of thing. Again, Woolper Tinger, I think, being that it's a beast, being that it's a 1 mana, basically 2/2, but even divided. So like single target early game removal can't take it out. Don't know if we'll see another card like this. This card, I'm excited to Trampling Rhino. And not the reason being is just because Face Hunter, they were kind of a deck that, hey, you win by turn 4 kind of thing. Or, you know, you at least get them to a point where your hero power can win in a few turns by turn 4. And that's kind of it. And you run out of gas. And I mean, I know that sounds weird that that's a good thing, but to me that made it healthy, because, you know, that meant that their game plan didn't work. And with Trampling Rhino, that kind of puts it into a, we didn't quite kill you yet. Maybe you got like 10 or 12 health left, and you play a minion, and we're going to kind of punish you for playing that minion by playing the Trampling Rhino with a 5/5 rush that also then does damage to you. Usually also gets buffed by the Wrangler, making it so even if you have more than 5 health, this card will still deal damage to you. But also just makes it so you have to play around it as well, as another class. Like, it just added that late for Face Hunter game damage potential that hits you over the top. Now, the idea of Trampling Rhino, Trample from like Magic the Gathering, a neat one. As weird as it is, I actually personally feel like it would be better suited in like a ramp Druid deck, where you ramp out like a single 8/8 and you plop it down, and they have to kill it, or else it'll start running over your minions and dealing damage to face. That's just me. That's a flavor thing that could also be busted because the Druid's ramp. So, you know, maybe that's not a great example, but for some reason that's just sort of kind of excited to see this one go. Let me know what you think. Top 5 Mage class cards that will be rotating out during the next expansion. Mozaki. I don't have Mozaki personally. I know as of right now, it's not like super common to see due to Encanter's Flow being nerfed twice, as well as probably some other things that affected it. Mozaki OTK mages have popped up, whether it be like there was... I think a while ago there was, you know, the one where you get a bunch of arcane missiles, and you would get, you know, your spell damage up a bunch, and you would launch your arcane missiles that would end up being like 15 missiles. And of course would this card, personally, I mean, I know some people really like that style. I will say from my personal point of view, I'm going to be super excited to see Mozaki leave. I don't think Mozaki itself is a problem. I think You know, say if you had 5 other spells to play that turn, unless it survived, it really couldn't outburst that much damage. If someone else was at full health, really been more of the way the game has gone. That's kind of made Mozaki feel a bit more annoying. You have things like your mana biscuits and your hot streaks and the Incanter's Flow, as mentioned, and things like that allowed you to play 20 spells in the run of a turn to hit your opponent for a crazy amount of spell damage. Personally, I'm excited to see you leave, Mozaki. Devolving Missiles, not to bring up, there's, in the Mage, I actually have a few cross-class or whatever cards you may want to call it, dual-class cards. Devolving Missiles is one of those ones where it's not played in every deck, necessarily a meta-defining thing, just the sheer amount of decks it could go into as a 1-mana disrupt your opponent. There's a lot of decks out there that play combo pieces. You know, you have your Talon Ford rings, for instance, as an example, that gets played a lot. This disrupts that. Any kind of, even just tempo to take control, which means you can usually deal with it maybe with your ping, especially if you're playing the ping mage with wildfires. So maybe not in every single mage deck, but I think this card is going to be missed as, you know, it acts as a silence, and silence is something that is very strong in this game. Brain Freeze is the other dual class card that I included here because it has been a relative staple in multiple different versions of Mage over the last couple of years. And I mean, it's because, again, you have so many other cheap spells and things you can play along with the Brain Freeze, and a 1-mana deal 3 damage or even deal 3 damage and freeze it is very powerful. Worst case scenario, I mean, I've done it very randomly, or seldomly, I should say, not randomly, but using it just as a 1-mana freeze isn't even the worst thing. May hinder some mage decks that, you know, aren't super aggressive early. Mask of Cthulhu, for me, is probably, especially currently, one of the cards rotating out that I think will hurt mage decks quite a bit. And the reason is not just because it's sometimes is a 7-mana Pyroblast, which it is, but also now with the Dawn Grasp hero card, I think the Mask of Cthulhu has been played not just for that reason, but because you can replay it off of the Dawn Grasp. And Big Spell Mage has gotten some support just very recently, and Mask of Cthulhu just fit that really well. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe it was kind of too reliant on sort of a later game burn combination. I'm sad to see this one go. It's really good. I think it wasn't like, you know, since it was random, if your opponent does have minions on the board, sometimes it whiffed. So it wasn't directly like a 7-mana deal 10. And I would be remiss to not bring up Incanter's Flow. So even though this card has been nerfed twice, and it was 2 mana, it's just been too crazy ever since release. I mean, obviously it wasn't super crazy until things like Deck of Lunacy, and then Mozaki Mage became a bit more the spell mage, I think, when this had first come out, just like the plain spell mage where you played your Incanter's Flow even without the Deck of Lunacy. And then this just, if you did get these early, all of a sudden you were drawing 0-mana spells, and then you could use like Cram Sessions to draw a bunch of cheap spells. Your Pexus Blasts were then only 3 mana, and 3 mana deal 5 damage, summon a minion, like a 5-drop minion, obviously very powerful. So even after being nerfed twice, I just think this type of mana discount in the game personally isn't good for the game. I'm glad to see things like the Ramp Druid stuff go, the Incanter's Flow go, Lightning Bloom and Shaman go, some of the, you know, Skull of Gul'dan and Demon Hunter go. Hopefully we don't get too many more mana discount cheaty style cards in the next coming couple expansions. That might help level set sort of our power level of decks as we move forward into the next standard rotation. The top 5 neutral cards or card packages that will be rotating out of standard in the next expansion that I believe will impact multiple decks the most. Up first, we have the animated Broomstick. Maybe not even quite in as many decks today as it was, but for quite a while, the animated Broomstick was just sort of in every single deck as a not just a 1-mana 1/1 rush, but of course gives all your other minions rush, which the mechanic itself is very powerful. Good example of where this comes in a lot, the Libram Paladin deck, which Librams are also rotating out. People would play the Libram of Hope, 8/8 with Divine Shield, maybe something else, animated Broomstick, hit with the 8/8. Animated Broomstick, Lord Barov, who also is rotating out, sure, made it so you made all their health 1, but it also allowed your Lord Baroth to attack, which you usually use to kill itself, which does the 1 damage, so it was like a 2-card board clear, as well as just even sometimes a 1/1 for 1 with Rush. I think it's good that it's gone. Things that give your entire board Rush for 1 mana, even if it didn't come with a 1/1 body, honestly, is very potent. So I think this will be interesting to see it go, see what other kind of mechanics they bring in, as they tend to bring in new keywords, maybe in the next core set or things like that. That then maybe we'll have a minion that gives all minions that mechanic. The Guardian Og Merchant. This is one I actually had to think about quite a bit to see if it was on this list. There are multiple minions that had seen play. The one that does 1 damage, it gives spell damage in Rogue, for example. I think with the Og Merchant, though, in a lot of aggro decks, and then I've even seen it in some tempo decks, or decks that just maybe have Iron Deep Trogs in it for early game tempo that's not even pure aggro, play the Guardian Og Merchant. Divine Shield, again, is just such a powerful sort of keyword ability that dealing 1 damage to something usually doesn't matter, and also giving this a 2/1 body on top of it. The fact it's neutral and can go in any deck in any class means that I think losing that versatility to go in any deck in any class might be a relatively big impact to the meta shift the next standard rotation. My baby boy Tour Guide. So Tour Guide. Oh man, I'm gonna miss him. He's played in a lot of different kind of decks. Just the fact, like, okay, so Hero Powers wouldn't be a card worth 2 mana per se, but a lot of the times, there's might be something either in a Ping Mage or Warlock in particular, or Hunter. Hunter, for instance, this becomes for turn 1/1, deal 2 damage to the opponent's face. Or in Mage, Ping Mage, or anything like that, especially Ping Mage, if this becomes a 1 mana 1/1, deal 2 or 3 damage to a target, which is really powerful. Warlock, same idea. 1 mana 1/1, draw a card. Impact quite a bit of decks more. A lot of these are low cost. Actually, they're all low cost. Well, most of them are low cost, and I think that's because the fact that they're neutral minions means they can go in any deck. Low cost means that they're easy to play and they're high value. Tour Guide is just that. It's a high value card. The Cult Neophyte. This is one that actually I don't think was played a super ton when it first came out with Scholomance Academy. However, the meta shifted throughout the last year to be really spell heavy focused. Similar reasons to why obviously Iron Deep Trog works really well this day and age. Cult Neophyte is just like, hey, we know that the best way you probably have to answer our 3/2 is either a 2 or 3 mana spell on your next turn. So what we're going to do is we're going to play Cult Neophyte. Now you don't have a way to either answer this, or say you're against a Ramp Druid and you're like, you're going to try to Lightning Bloom Overgrowth. I'm going to play Cult Neophyte. And you can't do that. Slows them down by a turn. And I guess anybody too who's played Hearthstone for a while, slowing them down from progressing what they want to do by 1 full turn can actually win you a game. Obviously, it doesn't always do that. You might play this and then your opponent, they go to, on their turn 2 mana, they play a Cult Neophyte, which actually messes with you, and they didn't play a spell, which means it didn't do anything. But just that sort of versatility, and it's just a good static minion, right? 2 mana, 3/2. So even if it doesn't affect them, it's not like it's a huge downside. So have a lot of decks lose out on that sort of counterplay to try to counter spell-heavy decks, and I think it will be missed. Now, I'm showing Cthulhu the Shattered, but we're actually going to be losing all of the redos of the old gods. Cthulhu, Yasharaj. My brain is not working. N'Zoth, and, well, I'm just going to look. Yogg's, wow. Ooh, people are going to be mad at me for that one. I forgot about Yogg. They're all going to be rotating out. I think that's going to be huge. I think it's going to be huge hit, because cards like Yogg Saron, people would literally not just build decks around it, but say you have those spell-heavy decks like the Ramps Druids, like I've talked about a ton, won't be there for like a late-game finisher. You have your Yasharaj, who not only is the Bolner OTK Shaman, but again in Druid, allows you to play strongmen, clowns, things like that. The Cthulhu decks, they're gone, and N'Zoth hasn't really been lately, but there has been times, of course, where you have like Menagerie, N'Zoth type of decks. Anyway, so I think it's going to be a huge impact. I liked Whispers of the Old Gods years and years ago. That was one of my favorite sets. It was the first standard rotation that they had ever done. Was when Whispers of the Old Gods had come into it. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of the Old Gods in standard. I'm sure they're going to bring them back some way, shape, or form. And personally, I hope they do. They always add good flavor, big powerhouse boss monsters for decks that I think is really important to be around. So Can't wait to see how the old gods make a comeback in a future set. But thank you guys for sticking around, and I'll see you guys in the next one.